project is cabinet doors. I've been experimenting with it to try to figure out what I wanted to do. I was originally gonna buy my doors because I didn't want to just do a plain wood, which I've seen a lot of people do, and that's great, but I wanted to have a little bit more, I guess, depth to it. But the problem is that you end up starting to get too heavy. So I found some baseboards, and I also didn't want it to be super thick because, of course, inside your van, the thicker you get, the more claustrophobic it starts to feel. So just from a visual standpoint, it's going to look like this, where you can see. So this is 1/2-inch trim or baseboard, and then I actually routed it or cut this piece off so I could get the 1/4 inch in it. However, I'm going to do something a lot easier than the corner joints using a 45 degree together. I'm going to use my Craig jig because I liked it so much. I looked online and found a video put on by them of how to make cabinet doors, and you can see super strong. I mean, just really strong. So I'm going to use my 1/2-inch. Essentially, you cut your wood, you put it together. This is just my experimentation to see. I thought I might need screws that were shorter than 1 inch, and I do. They come through otherwise. So I ordered some 3/4 inch, and I'll get those soon. But in the meantime, I can cut all my wood, and after you cut it, then you take a router and route the inside to create the same shoulder here that'll house the 1/4 inch plywood, and then you nail it down, and then I paint the whole thing. So it makes it really simple to do. For this particular job, pretty much have everything already here. I've got my Craig jig and all the supporting pieces. I'll have screws. I need to get the right size. You need your clamps to clamp things down as you're building and screwing things together. Trusty tape measure, and that's it. So I'm going to spend today cutting and cutting and cutting, and then, well, like I said, I'll move to the next step, which will be to attach them all together, and then router the inside, and then affix the back with 1/4 inch plywood, and then put my holes in for the hinges, and then I'll paint everything, and then I'll assemble it onto my my cabinets. So time to get going. I am going to do a quick overview of cutting. It seems simple, but there are some tricks to do. I will say, full disclaimer, I got these from watching the Craig Jig video on how to build cabinet doors. It's really well worth the time. I'll put a link in the description section so you can jump to it if you want. But the cliff notes of it is, you look at the thickness of the boards that are making up your cabinet in your van, and you'll add that to the inside dimension, and it ends up calculating out, splitting the difference, and giving you the perfect width to cut your wood. So my inside dimension, at least of this particular cabinet, is 26 inches, and the thickness of the board that surrounds that piece is 3/4 inch. So I'm gonna cut a board that is 26 3/4. And I need 2 of these. And I'm choosing to make the longest piece go end to end, and then the smaller pieces will fit inside. They call them the rails. Okay, so 26 3/4. So I need 2 of these. Another thing is, remember when you cut that your blade has a thickness to it. So make sure you're left with your the measurement you're looking for. Make sure that's on this side, and it'll give you the perfect, because my cutting edge is going to be this side of the blade, and this middle section actually takes some wood out from it. So I don't know if that doesn't make sense. Sorry, I probably wasn't explaining it well. So this should be 26 3/4. Yep, that's perfect. Now I need to do one more 26 3/4. Six and 3/4. Okay. 26 3/4. Okay, so now I have my kind of upper and lower piece, and now I need the piece that connects each side, the smaller of the two. And so the trick they showed for that, again, so it's 12 1/8 on the inside, and then I need to add, it happens to be my, my wood on the bottom and top frame of my cabinet is actually 1 inch. So I have 12 1/8 plus 1 inch is 13 1/8. And the trick they say is to just put your wood together, 2 pieces, and look for 13 1/8, align it on one side, so right there, and then you can look on the opposite side of the wood and you'll know exactly what you need to cut, which is 8 5/8. And you don't need to do any math that way. 8 5/8. Perfect, 8 5/8. And so now, obviously I'll need to screw these together with the jig, Craig jig. I need to wait till I get the my 3/4 inch screws, but it'll look like that, which will be perfect. And then it'll hinge up. All right, so the next step for making my cabinet doors is to actually drill the holes with my trusty Craig jig. I love this thing, and I did have to experiment with the screw size a bit, using the matrix document that they give you with Craig jig. It did say that for a 1/2 inch thick wood, you could use 1 inch screws, but it's not true, at least for this setup. You can see I kept breaking through when I was kind of just experimenting with it. So I ended up ordering 3/4 inch screws, and it works really well. So it doesn't come through at all. And actually, this is the finished piece. I did my first one. It came out quite well, super strong. I'll show that in a minute doing that. Anyways, the process is pretty straightforward. You saw this already when I was doing showing how to use the Craig jig in another video. So I've already set up this Craig jig for the right size screw, which is this little guy, screw length, and the right thickness of wood, which is this moves up and down as a result of it, and then you just drill your pilot holes. Now it's time to screw in the wood. So quick demonstration of how easy it is to put the cabinets together once you've got kind of all the right pieces. So I've obviously cut all the wood at this point. I've also drilled with my Craig jig the pocket holes in each, and it's time to now assemble the cabinet door frames, but it's quite easy. So again, make sure you've got a good setup that you can do everything you need. Glue is not mandatory but from everything I've read, it does help. And a little glue will go a long way. One thing I did learn is make sure your surface you're clamping is nice and flat. And I had to go to, as I mentioned, 3/4 inch screws, but you can hear it. I've noticed that not probably 1 out of 8 screws, maybe 1 out of 10, doesn't grip on the inside when I do it. You don't hear the clicking, but with the glue I'm doing, I figured it's still really strong. And the next step I'm going to do is use a router and create a step or channel or a lip on the inside that I can put my 1/4 inch plywood in. And I figured that is also going to strengthen everything. So with all of that together, this thing will be really strong. All right. See? All good. All right, so it'll go here, like that, and then open up. It's gonna look great. All right, so I'm 2 down and I have 13 more to go. All right, so I've officially finished building my 15 or 16 door frames for my cabinets. You can see them there and in the picture that I'm showing. So I'm ready to go do the next step. I actually went and did one more step, which was apply these plugs that are used to cover up from the jig or the pocket holes, and they're literally called pocket hole plugs. I mostly used paintable ones, but they ran out, so I had to get ones that were pine, which match the wood here. After I need to cut them off and level them with the surface. I'll sand them down in a little bit, but I'm gonna just do this one step because then it's starting to rain here. And then I'm gonna use my router to route a step on the inside, which will allow me to set my plywood down flush with it and create a really nice look for the inside of, or for my cabinet doors. And then I'll have to cut my plywood, and then I'll staple them in and glue them. I'll show that a little later. But anyway, so the next step I figured is I create this jig or this fixture to hold my wood so that I can both cut off easily the plugs, and then I can route right afterwards and kind of do it all in one step. So let's see how well it works. Go. That's perfect. And still looks good in the front. All right, now I just got to do it to, what, 14 or 15 more cabinet doors. The next piece of me making my cabinet doors is for me to drill my holes for my hinges. And I have to say, this took an incredible amount of time for me to do in terms of research and ordering them and trying them. And the reason is that since I didn't buy, I'm not doing it out of one solid piece. As you know, I'm doing it making my door. This piece right here, this trim, I guess, is only a 1/2 inch. And most traditional hinges are meant for 3/4 inch, at least the European style, which is what I wanted to use because of the strength. And a European style hinge basically uses a pocket right here that the hinge sits into, and again, that creates, you know, really strong connection. So I researched and finally found a Blum compact hinge that fits just about right for me. And now I'm going to use this, it's called a Craig compact jig or compact hinge jig. And it's really nice. It allows really a consistent hole depth and positioning. It comes, you know, with all the stuff you need. You need to experiment and make sure you get these are for offsets, so it lets it go farther in or farther out. And you need to, I would suggest doing it on some sample wood and making sure that the close is going to be what you want. And then you have to make sure you adjust with the collet the appropriate depth. But once you have that, it's just, you know, drill and repeat. So it's quite nice. I'm doing it with 3.5 inches from each side. You can do it whatever you want. I've seen people online do it with 3 inches, 4 inches, 3.5, 2 inches, just depends on the size. Go. See? Perfect. And then this will fit like that. Perfect each time. And especially with, you know, you don't have to worry about drilling too deep on the other side. So it's now time to put my my panel in the back of my door frame, the frames for my doors that I've made. And I started with 1/4 inch plywood, cut them down to size, and I also, as you saw already, used a router and created a shelf in here that was 1/4 inch deep. And one little comment is when you use a router, it creates a rounded edge, and so when you make your boards, you've got to make sure you cut the corners off so that it will set inside very nicely. One of the difficulties I've had in this process with these cabinet doors is that I chose, of course, to not buy one, and also I chose to not make it from a standard way. Typically, you end up using 3/4 inch. That's what's standard for cabinet doors. It's also, if you buy, you know, like 1 inch plywood or any kind of birch wood or anything like that, you know, it actually comes out to about 3/4 inch. And mine, I chose, as I had mentioned previously, it's only a 1/2 inch. It's really light as well, but solid pine, so that I can, you know, screw things into it and bore holes out without an issue. So the light is great, but the 1/2 inch isn't so great because everything is built around sort of 3/4 inch when you get them, including brad nails and the staples you might use to put this and attach it to the back. So I ended up needing to go to screws because I just couldn't find anything that would fit. And I ended up choosing a number 6 1/2 inch screw because I happen to have a number 6 counter bore in my set. It's the smallest one I had, and I didn't feel like I wanted to buy another one for this. So just, you know, simply put them in. I will take this and I'll countersink my holes, and then I will put the screws in. I'll also end up putting another trim piece on the outside. I'll show that next. But this, I've already tried a couple and they've worked out really well. So I think I've got it down. Also, one other tip is I numbered everything as I went along. So every cabinet I made, as I made it, I put a number in the upper corner. So this is number 14. And what it's allowed me to do is I also numbered the boards as I was cutting them down, because you can see there's quite a stack. And so now I don't have to figure things out. I've got number 14 on here and it fits right in, no issue. And I can just put it in, screw it, and then move it aside to the next one. Create a bit of an assembly line. See? Nice. Okay, so I'm ready to do the last couple steps on my cabinet doors that lead up to me being able to paint. So I am excited about getting this done. The next one is for me to sand. So I need to sand off any of the wood putty that I used to fill in cracks and holes from my plugs. And then once I do that, I need to attach my scribe. So scribe is this really thin wood, and it's actually perfect. It's about 3/16 of an inch thick by about, I think 3/4 of an inch wide, and it will hide the gaps that are between my panel and my frame. And I should say the gaps are there on purpose. I didn't mention this before, but when you cut your panel, you want to cut it exactly, you know, measure the exact, say, width, and then subtract 1/8 of an inch when you cut. That'll give a 1/16 of an inch on each side and allow you enough room for the board to expand and contract over time. And in terms of using this scribe, to install it, I'm going to use a nail gun, a brad nailer I should say. It's 3/4 of an inch brad nails, which was the shortest I could find. And I experimented on, you know, some other wood, and as long as I go at a slight angle, it works perfect, even though the thickness of this is just a little bit less than 3/4 of an inch if you add it all up. And I also got this multi-mark tool. It's by Craig, and it is just great. So what you do is you adjust it to whatever you need. In this case, I'm using it as a means of getting the exact setback of my wood from the edge here. So I'll put it here and then I'll nail it, and use this to create the perfect symmetry around the entire thing. What I normally do is I'll measure this one and cut this scribe, and then I'll cut an identical piece so it's there. I'll install this one, and then I will measure how much I need to go from here to the other scribe and then cut those pieces. But for the sake of going quicker, I decided just to cut all the scribes at one time so I could just show them being installed real quick. Go. All right, sometimes you're just good and sometimes you're lucky. This time I will chalk it up to luck. 85 feet of scribe, and out of all the pieces of doing this for all the cabinets, I was left with 5 pieces, and not a single piece is big enough to even do the shortest side on a cabinet. So talk about efficiently using your material. Very cool. I'm finally on to painting my cabinets, and yes, excited. So this is the last step for the cabinets prior to installing obviously the hardware I've got to put on, and then I get to put them up. I had to wait till it was a little bit of a nicer day because I got to lay them all out, and I want to make sure that the drying process is good and I don't have to, you know, kind of take a hand or hair dryer or a outside heater and put them on. And today is perfect. It's going to be like 60 degrees today, and then it drops again tomorrow. And it rained yesterday, so this is the perfect window. So I'm going to go and put my base coat on and let it dry. Then I stick my final enamel coat on. I am now on the last step. I kind of say that, oh, I'm almost at the last step. This is the last step prior to installing the cabinets, and it's putting in the hinges. So like a lot of things, ramifications from picking thinner wood, as I mentioned, is the hinges, and couldn't find any. Searched and searched and searched, got different samples. Of course, I looked at the dimensions online. They're so close. So I did find these bum, it's the style or the brand, hinges, and the brand is bum, and then it's a European style hinge, which, you know, goes into this pocket hole, and it even has a soft close, which is really a nice feature. In any case, even with this, finding a lower profile, it still was too thin, so I had to pay crazy money for a spacer, and I think this almost came close to the price of one of these. Not really, but it seemed like it. It was outrageous, and if I had a 3D printer, I would have printed this myself, but I don't. So I ended up just buying it from the online store. Anyways, it fits quite nice in there. And then just a little tip is when you put screws in on cabinet doors, always do it by hand. Don't ever use an electric screwdriver because you might go right through it. So you want to be able to just sort of ease into it and get it just about right, especially for something like this that's so close. All right, I am officially done with my van cabinet doors. Okay, well, maybe not officially done. I'm mostly done. And I think that's probably the curse of every meaty project like this, that especially with so many pieces to it, that you're never quite done. So I decided to draw a line in the sand because I'm close enough, and I'm going to move on to do some other things, and then I'll leave my little remaining pieces for kind of later when I'm doing my miscellaneous stuff. I thought, unlike my other videos, I would do a little bit of a
kind of post-project one, so I could talk about the things that I really liked and the things that I learned while doing this. And the reason is that all the other videos have been the genesis of them have been from watching so many great YouTube van lifer videos that they've done before. And that's the great thing about this whole van life is there's so much information out there. In this case, I hadn't really seen anybody do this specific cabinet doors. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm sure it does, because there's so many out there, but you can easily miss or not find it. So as a result of me not really seeing it, I decided to do this as more of a how-to, and thus I figured this would be useful for people. If you don't want to watch it, obviously skip this section and then you're done with the video. All right, so just before I begin, you'll notice this is open. It's on purpose. I want to leave it open until I finish doing my shelving system inside. This is open, but I'm actually not going to close it off at all. I'm going to just put parachute cord or netting in front of it. It's meant to have this open look. This one is not done, and I'll explain it in a moment why. Okay, let's kind of start with what worked. I really liked the way this looked, and the one I've seen mostly is people using, plywood, right? 1-inch plywood. This is birch. It's a beautiful look, and you end up painting it anyways, but it's thick, right? It ends up being, it's 3/4 of an inch thick, and it's quite weighty. I did measure it. I measured the amount of wood that would take to build a solid cabinet compared to this style, and these cabinet doors are less than half the weight of using these. And it may not seem like much, but I've got 15 of these normal doors that actually open, and then I've got areas like this that are large that I'm going to use to cover sides. So I've probably got 18, 19 door surfaces, and you add that up times 2 for the weight. That's one thing. The second piece is, because it's so light, these Blum hinges, which I love, are soft close, and there's no issue with the weight. Closes really nice. One other item to do, or that really was beneficial for me, is testing things out. Now, I do this with everything when I haven't done it before, because you're going to make mistakes and make them on things that don't matter, right? Otherwise, you'll end up seeing it in your project, your finished project, and it'll either bug you and you'll never fix it, or you'll have to do it all over again. So this is a perfect thing to do. Test everything out, do samples. You see it in my video, me doing, the screws and so on. Like, this is an example of me testing out the nails. You have to adjust how far they go through, and if you do it too much, they go right through the surface. So, and making sure they're the right length, and so on and so on. And here's a example of the notch for my plywood to sit on, and making sure my router is adjusted correctly. Anyways, you get the idea. It's just really good to make sure you do that. Okay, now things to be cautious of or think about. So I did 1/2 inch. I did it. This is solid pine. It worked really well as long as you kind of get the depth of everything. However, because it's only 1/2 inch, it rippled into every other decision that I had to make with this. Case in point, the hinges, the Blum hinges, as I talked about, they traditionally come for 3/4 inch. So just be aware when we make a decision that differs from what the standard is, you might have to come up with creative solutions to implement something. Up here, the reason this isn't done, the distance from here to this surface is, I think, like 3/4 inch. That is way too much for my hinges to work. The hinges, in order to work appropriately, really need what they're connected to needs to be flush with the outside. So you need the frame to be flush up here. And because that's not the case, my hinges just won't work. So I've probably going to have a solution of either putting another piece of wood here or finding different hinges for just this one. But think about that when you're building your cabinet frames and how you're going to implement things. This one, the support right here is back a little bit more as well, but it's only a 1/4 inch at most. And luckily the hinges have the ability to move about 1/8 of an inch this way and 1/8 of an inch down through adjusting screws, but it still is not quite enough. So I ended up, you know, instead of having to do something crazier, I just routed the back of the corner and with a 1/4 inch router bit, and it took it off enough so that I can open it up without an issue. Let's see, anything else? So my measurements, how I was describing it in the video to kind of figure out your widths and everything of each one of it and the height and the wood, worked really, really well. As a matter of fact, everywhere it worked well. But when you have a whole bunch of them right next to each other, so 2 of them, not an issue. But when you have something like this where there's 4 of them are down here, just realize everything starts to stack on itself. So before you mount it up, don't just focus on the one cabinet door. Put a couple of them there, get somebody to help you so you can align them where they need to be and then screw them in. If you put them too much one direction and you don't have any more slack left in subsequent doors to put up, you'll kind of run into a bind where they're touching and they won't open and close directly or correctly. So anyways, just put them up together so you can figure out where everything needs to go. And then the last thing is, I think I know what happened, but you can't see it. There is a massive gap between these 2 down here. It's probably a 1/2 inch, maybe even more, which, you know, it's like that much. And I can see right through it. Now, granted, there's light coming through everywhere, and so it's really obvious. So I'm gonna fix it by putting a piece of wood behind this that'll stick out like that. And so when it closes, this one will go on top of it and I'll just see white. So it'll be a lot better and hide it. Lucky for me, sometimes it works in your favor. Of all the cabinets, this is the one that's the least important because you can't see it from that side when you're in the back of the van. You can just see it from an angle, and you really can't see it from the front looking this way as well. It looks perfect from the side, so you won't even notice it. And I don't even get into it because down below these are kind of faux cabinet in a way, because this is my electrical box, and so I should never need to get in there, or it's really rare. But anyways, just double check. The reason I think it got messed up is they're all built perfect, but this wood that it's connecting into bowed out a little bit at the bottom, and so when I connected the hinges in, it obviously is going to be farther apart. So I think that's what happened. And when I measured the door sizes, I only measured it kind of up here. I don't think I measured between the 2 sections below because I assumed it was the same all the way down. So that is it. And anyways, hope you enjoyed this video, and remember, like and or subscribe if you do enjoy it. I guess it's on to the next stage of the van.